welcome to episode 52 of the Tire Recycling Podcast. We're thrilled to have you here, and whether you're a long-time listener or a new visitor to our channel. If you're enjoying our podcast and video content, we'd like to invite you to take the next step and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Did you know that a staggering 86% of our viewers are not subscribed? Our goal is to change that statistic and bring it down to 50% or even lower. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on our latest episodes, insightful interviews, and valuable discussions surrounding the world of tyre recycling. As a regular viewer, you already know the immense value our channel provides. Subscribing will ensure you stay up to date with the latest industry trends, innovative technologies, and sustainable practices. So, if you're ready to take your engagement to the next level, hit that subscribe button below. Together, let's bring down that percentage from 86 to 50 and beyond. Now, let's get on with today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Tire Recycling Podcast. We are now here with episode 52. As usual, the editor of Tire Recycling, Ewan Scott, is here with me. Ewan, how are you doing today? Could you give us some insight into what you have planned for today's episode?
Well, thank you for having me along, Richard. Again, it's a lovely day here, and I wish I was out in the sunshine. Today, we're talking with Suzanne Madelung from PVP Triptis in Germany. Now, this interview, this podcast, is not so much about PVP Triptis, but rather the issue of how Europe deals with risk in recycled materials.
Okay, well, let's get stuck into that interview and have a look at what Suzanne had to say.
Thank you for agreeing to talk to me today.
No problem.
First of all,
the pleasure being here.
Can you give me a little bit of background to yourself?
Oh, sure. PVP was founded in the year 2000, and I've been on board since the very beginning. The philosophy of PVP was always to not just be a recycler, but to also make products, which we did already 20 years ago. So in that phase, we were certainly pioneers in not just doing the recycling, but in fact, manufacturing products. Nowadays, several companies, of course, do that as well, because the added value you obviously only get once you actually are in the business of manufacturing. I've always been in quality control and product development. That's always been my area of expertise, and of course, with the additional developments in the EU at the moment, I've also been heavily involved in work with EURIC and the challenges that actually the recycling industry is faced today, which is considerable, in particular tires, of course.
Yeah, okay. So this is what we're here to talk about today, the challenges.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that you spoke about at the EURIC conference was the way the ECHA RAC assessed risk, and you talked about I think you talked about the lack of assessment of the risk of migration. Can you explain that to me?
Oh, that's of course a very complicated topic. The EU has a chemical strategy on sustainability, which is important, not only in theory but in practice. The chemical strategy is supported, of course, by ECHA and by the joint research division of the European Commission. And in order to facilitate the easy method for consumer products it was basically agreed to use chemical content as a method of measuring, because there are techniques, there are test methods available, even if they differentiate from lab to lab. There was a certain amount of know-how a couple of years ago when this was all started. Migration is something that has been always done in, for example, the food industry, food contact materials, when plastics are obviously packed with food. There are some well-established test methods, but in fact, for consumer products, this was not very well known. Today, the advances, of course, have been considerable. It's a philosophical question. Do you just because in a consumer product there can be chemicals inside that we as a consumer don't really want. The question is not are the chemicals in there, and when we touch them, do we come into contact with them purely by being present, or do these chemicals, can they leach out and either go into the environment or affect human health in terms of skin contact, etc. And these things have to be considered, I think, from product to product. Rubber is quite a unique product. The rubber is often put together with plastics, but rubber is inherently different than plastic. In some ways, of course, plastic can be much easier recycled because all you have to do is really melt it. As long as it's clean, there are methods for washing. These things have all also been established. Rubber, in effect, is quite unique because some of the chemicals that we are talking about are not actually, they're not added in the manufacture of the tire. Once the caoutchouc is being synthesized with the vulcanization process, these chemicals actually, they are created in the polymer and they are locked. Chemically, they're very well locked. And they don't actually, they may be present, but they don't leach out. And for us as an industry, we actually need to take 2 steps back and look at tire circularity and sustainability first, before we can actually look at the problems that we have with the battle between, say, chemical content and migration. The circular economy is going to play a vital role in achieving climate neutrality by 2050, and also, of course, for implementing the Green Deal. The Green Deal will not be successful without the involvement of recycling the raw materials or the consumer products that we have and obtaining new secondary raw materials that can be used for other projects, for extending the lifespan of a particular product. So although the chemical strategy for sustainability is really important in terms of chemical content, we need to actually take 2 steps back and actually decide, do we actually want to recycle tires? Do we want to give them an extended life, the products? Yes or no? If the general consensus is yes, of course, we want to conserve resources. We have to do that. We are much more CO2 neutral if we actually take the rubber and recycle it and add it into new products. So this has to be actually a conscious decision. And once this decision is made, then we can actually go about and say, well, how are we going to solve some of the problems that are inherent to rubber? So it's often, what comes first? How do you start the discussion on a sensible level? If you're talking emotionally, I mean, I'm a mother of 2 children. Obviously, I mean, I want a safe environment for my kids. Everybody wants a safe environment. I don't want to be in contact with chemicals that are inherently dangerous. The question is, though, do we want to ban everything? For example, the new discussion on PFAS. The materials that we wear, they're in contact with our skin, so of course it plays a role. But there are other consumer products where the contact, once they've been installed, for example, in construction products, the contact is negligible. It's almost nothing. So we have to be very careful about this kind of a discussion, and start at the beginning. So maybe we shouldn't really start with migration. We should also start with looking at what is the EU strategy? What do we really want? Do we want to recycle rubber? Yes or no? If we want to recycle tires, yes, we do. Then we have to find solutions. So it's very hard to answer that question in just one sentence.
Yeah, of course. I wasn't expecting a simplistic response. Currently, the way the risk is measured, as I understand, is basically on the content. So the ECHA will look at the material. In our case,
well,
rubber.
Basically, the test method is very simple. You take the product and you literally cook it at 60 degrees in a cancer-causing chemical called toluene, and you cook it for at least an hour, in some test methods for much longer, and then you measure the amount of PAHs that you have cooked out of this consumer product. Now that's not practical. That's not related to how we use a rubber product, whether it be a tire or your windscreen wiper or whatever. I mean, nobody goes out, takes a piece of rubber from their windscreen wiper and cooks it in a cancer-causing chemical and then says, this material is actually dangerous. We need to ban it.
So there's at that sort of level, there needs to be some thought given to the real risk of.
Absolutely, the real risk.
Yeah, rather than it just being there. That is an interesting take. It's something that after 20 odd years in the recycling sector, it's only recently come to the fore that the test method that ECHA uses is perhaps not the most appropriate.
Well, actually, risk assessment needs, I'm not a toxicologist, or that's not my area of expertise, but I can tell you that a risk assessment always has to be in relation to the use. So, for example, you know a lot about infill material using SBR rubber in artificial sports pitches. There, the risk assessment would have to be done according to how the rubber granulate is used. So, of course, that's a totally different discussion. Artificial pitches are being banned because of microplastic issues, not because of the PAH content, and not because of the use directly, but for other reasons. So it applies to lots of other materials, not just SBR, but it applies to EPDMs, for example, that don't even contain PAHs necessarily. But principally, yes, risk assessment is always according to the use that the material, how we as a consumer uses it. The problem is that actually the EU Commission stated in its PAH regulation, for example, that by 27th of December 2017, it will actually look at migration. ECHA has done studies and has offered the EU Commission the opportunity to say, give us the mandate and we will have a look at migration. So the Joint Research Group has also looked at migration. They even have a test method that they've studied in considerable detail. So the associations on the side, they've already looked at this approach. The problem is the EU Commission is ignoring it, and I find that as a law-abiding citizen, I have a problem with the philosophy that the EU Commission says it will look at something by a certain deadline, and then they just ignore it because it's maybe an uncomfortable decision or an uncomfortable situation. But in the regulation, it was stipulated that by 2017, other methods will be considered. And to this date, 2023, which is now almost 6 years later, the Commission is not putting its money where its mouth is and is not saying, okay, we need to look at these alternatives. It may be not necessary for all products, but rubber is a very specific product. And its tires are, when they are no longer on the road, they are big, ugly, black, certainly not a very attractive product. And we should think we should have a strategy on what are we going to do with the tire once it's reached its end of life stage. And we can only do that if we actually start this discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tires are almost a necessary evil in that we cannot live without them.
Absolutely. Rubber is in, if we use water every time you open a faucet, you need rubber. Otherwise, you're not going to, it's really part of our life. So we need to look at what are the sensible routes that we can take, and do we want to recycle it, yes or no?
Absolutely. So on the question, you mentioned crumb rubber infill. With the ban imminent, and having spoken to a couple of EPR agencies in Europe, the consensus is that the door on crumb rubber infill is going to close. What will happen to the industry when the ban is imposed?
Oh, that question, of course, is very specific for the individual 27 EU states. I can only speak for Germany. I know that a lot of colleagues in Italy and Spain and even in France are very concerned for the recycling. In Germany, the situation is a little bit different. So I'd like to give you maybe some background information. After COVID, we have about still 500,000 tons of tires that need a new home, of which approximately 236,000 tons are transferred into granulates and powders. And in fact, in Germany, we're quite unique, as there are several companies that make consumer products, construction products, all sorts of applications, where basically 80% of the product is made out of entirely recycled SBR material. The applications are commonly known, that it's not a big secret, but the heavy impact is in construction products, which means acoustic, vibration, sports, transport industry, load securement, for example. There are a lot of products, railway applications, animal flooring, etc. So there's quite a large scope. So Germany is not really affected by the microplastic ban. That's not really it's not a really big concern. Excuse me, I have to cough. Sorry. That's not really a big concern of ours. Artificial turf has already been on the step out in Germany for many years. EPDM is still being used, but SBR more or less relatively seldom. Thermal disposal, of course, has always been still an issue. That's also on the regress, is also getting less and less because, of course, the cement industry is using other products that are, say, economically more viable than burning tires. And then, of course, there's pyrolysis, which is in everybody's mouth at the moment. But in actual fact, in Germany, pyrolysis is maybe 5,000 to 10,000 tons of material, and in our industry, we're looking at about 200,000 tons. So until pyrolysis can actually pick up the pace, the manufacture of products is still the most predominant use. So infill, I believe infill the restriction will come into place. It will take 8 years to probably be implemented. But I think it's died already in the discussion. The discussion has been so heavy and so emotionally steered that even if ECHA writes, I've had a look at the website again today. I've been on the REACH website and I've looked at ECHA's contribution. There's nowhere where it actually states that these that the SBR is in fact dangerous. They just say they don't recommend it be used. I find that a very difficult. If the EU wants to recycle, it cannot simply ban something because of the. They even wrote in their last report, ECHA, that the risk is extremely low. I mean, you have a risk of crossing the street. There's a risk of being alive. There's always a risk. The whole point is keeping the risk to a minimum. But if the philosophy is, well, the risk is extremely low, but we'll ban it in any case, I find that difficult because all the advantages that we have in our highly developed society, we're going to come to the point where we're going to have to question all these things. Do you want to walk around with a rain jacket from supplier X, which weighs 300 grams because it contains a chemical which makes it, of course, completely water repellent, and the jacket is light and weighs nothing? Or do you want to go back to the 60s where we were walking around in jackets that weighed 5 kilos just to keep us warm or dry? I think some of our advantages that we have in our highly developed society need to continue to be promoted, just because it makes life much more practical and pleasant. And going around and banning things, I think you have to be careful about what you ban and how you ban it.
Indeed. We could find ourselves in a situation where we can't do anything. I was discussing rubberized asphalt this week, and apparently there's a pressure group wanting to ban rubberized asphalt because of the risk of runoff and road wear particles, as there are with tires, and you can't win.
No, you can't win, because that's another lobby group that's trying to put its products into asphalt, and then it's not called rubberized asphalt, it's called something else. So basically what we're talking about here is we're always talking about a competition to ban a certain product in order to give another product the foretake. That's a difficult discussion, because that's lobbyism in its purest form. Certainly, everyone can do that. It's a free world, but if you think about it, the tire was on the road. What better idea to put back into the road the rubber? And you have many more advantages than disadvantages. You have better braking. You have less gisht on the road when it's pouring with rain. You have better visibility. I mean, I only see big advantages to rubberized asphalt. That some group, of course, wants to have it banned, I'm quite sure.
Yeah.
There will always be a group that will want to have something banned. But why don't we turn the discussion around and say they want to ban rubberized asphalt because of increased tire wear, apparently. I'd like to see somebody measuring that, first of all. If we're going to talk about banning again something else, I'd like some numbers. I'd like some proof. In Germany, the industry reckons that we have 60,000 tons of tire wear particles leaving the road and going into the fields. That's quite a big number. So instead of just banning infill because of microplastics issues, why don't we ban tires? Why are tires not banned? That's also a microplastic. And 60,000 tons is not a small quantity. So why do we not ask that question? Why is there a lobby group out there so strong that it can make that discussion go away, more or less? We need to talk about, if we're going to become a recycling society, if these chemicals are allowed in the tire while it's on the road and it's going through this tire wear, no matter how the consumer drives, if he drives sensibly or not sensibly. And we know that we have about 60,000 tons in Germany of tire particle wear that is going into the fields. Why are the manufacturers not making the tire not just safer, but healthier? Why are the same chemical content is in those wear particles that land in the fields as there are in the sports pitches? Where's the difference? In the fields, we grow our corn, we grow our wheat, it's there for donkey's years, it doesn't go away. And even if the wind picks up the tire wear particles, it's going to pick it up and carry it somewhere else. It's still going to be in the environment. So why are we not? I find the concept of a sustainable product initiative and the eco design, that is an interesting aspect that we should talk about. Keep the tire safe. Yes, of course, that's essential. But why can they not take out some of these chemicals?
Of course, the tire wear project is aware of the issue, and they tell us that they're looking at solutions, and certainly I'm not a chemist. The 6-PPD issue is one that they're very much aware of and are trying to do something about. But as it's a tire industry, and everything takes a long time to be processed and developed. We could go on talking about this for a long time, I guess.
Absolutely.
And I have really enjoyed this discussion, and you've been very informative. And hopefully, at some point, I'll get to visit you in Triptis and see.
That would be nice. Yes, you're very welcome. Doors are always open.
Right. Thank you very much for your time, Suzanne.
Thank you.
And there you have it. That was our interview with Suzanne Madelon. Ewan, what did you pick up from that interview? What parts did you find most interesting?
I think the story here is that the ECHA, the European Chemicals Agency, the risk assessment people, they assess the risk by its presence. So, for argument's sake, there is zinc in tires, therefore, and zinc on its own is a risk. Therefore, tires are a risk. And the argument that is being brought forward now by recyclers is that the way ECHA assess risk needs to be changed. They need to look at the actual risk of migration from the material to human beings or to the environment. So in tires, the content, like the zinc and so on, that is embedded in the tire, it's surrounded, and it's actually quite difficult to get that zinc out of the tire. The process they use at ECHA involves chemicals and heat that just would not arise in everyday life. So the tire industry and Suzanne, the tire recyclers, and Suzanne Madeline's fund, they're asking for Europe to look at an assessment of the risk of migration rather than just the risk from the presence. That is interesting, and it is something that I think will become a big issue in the coming years.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that assessment, Ewan, and once again for organising that interview. We'll be back very shortly with episode 53 of the Tire Recycling Podcast.